Hey everybody out there, and today for you guys I decided to go down a little trip of memory lane actually. So if you guys do not know, recently on this channel about a couple of weeks ago I celebrated my 6th year making Yu-Gi-Oh! YouTube videos. 6 years! That's a long time to be talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! All these years later, still making content for you guys. So I've been at this thing for a very, very long time, even though my subscriber count does not show that. But today, thanks to a fellow subscriber who suggested this idea, I decided to talk about how the game has changed since when I started YouTube back on March 16th, 2013 to now being in March and April of 2019. How much has this game changed really over the course of almost half a decade? What has changed? What has become new? What has happened? How has the game evolved? And that's what we're going to talk about. And we're going to be just talking about just like how this community of Yu-Gi-Oh! Has changed over the course of time. So the first thing I'm going to mention is that is straight up very interesting and very true, sadly, is how many YouTubers have come and gone since I started YouTube. People that made me want to make YouTube videos about Yu-Gi-Oh! Have come and gone. The big one being Galactic God, who we all miss, Alinthio, who I know is still around, he just doesn't make videos anymore because he's busy. Then you also have Yugi No, and the list just continues to go on and on and on. Mickey Vlogs, who remembers Mickey Vlogs? Nobody. Dub K Dad. Like, these guys uploaded a lot and inspired me to make YouTube videos 6 years ago. You know, and look where we're at now. You know, they're no longer uploading videos. And that's because life changes, things happen, it's understandable. But to be here for 6 years, that's a big accomplishment. The other thing we're going to talk about is how the game has just evolved since when I got started. When I got started in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! We were smack dab in the middle of a format known to you older school players as Fire Water format. You may be saying, I never heard of this format. Well, it's not as well known as Goat format, Dad Return format, Dragon Ruler format, you know, Pendulum, Pepe Magicians. Like, it's not as well known as those formats. But what Fire Water format was, as it was being called at the time, was Fire Fist versus Mermails. Now, this wasn't your granddaddy's, I mean, this is your granddaddy's Mermails. This is not, you know, this is with the Dragoons and all that stuff. And, you know, Fire Fist King Tiger and Coach Soldier Wolfbark was broken. And you want to know why? Because it was an instant exceed play. You recovered a resource and went into an exceed play with Colt Soldier Wolfbark. That was broken at this point in time in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! When I started making videos. And I look back on it now and people are like, oh, you know, that's just a basic thing you can give to any archetype out there. But that card was broken, and people at that time I remember talking about how Coach Soldier Wolfbark should be limited to 1 or 2 of, or banned outright, because it was just so broken, helping you go for exceed plays. Stupid times. We had no idea what was right around the corner. But at that time, we were in that format. I was playing Mermails, and I was also playing some other fun decks, but Spellbooks too I had. But that format was really fun. Mermails, OTKing against Fire Fist. Mermails and Fire Fist, even though Fire Fist are not played in the meta anymore, they were very well evenly matched, and that's why we called it Fire Fist Water format. Mermails pretty much dominated, but Fire Fist were probably the best second deck at that time because Wolfbark was so good. However, as you guys should know, because I'm talking about March 2013, you may be saying, well, Seto, you know, back then my channel was different. Seto, you know, ModernDayDuelist. What about Dragon Rulers? Well, Dragon Rulers didn't come out till May of that year. So 3 months later, the game suddenly changed from +1ing, gaining advantage, things of that nature, still working and grinding for your pluses, till being what Spellbook of Judgment, Dragon Rulers, broken. And at the time, we all knew that Dragon Rulers were good. And then we started seeing the results starting to come in February and March of that year, and saying, okay, Dragon Rulers are getting really good. I remember, and this is how long, this is kind of interesting. I remember when they announced the big Dragon Rulers and the little Dragon Rulers. And people were like, it looks like it's going to work okay. I mean, this looks like a good deck. You know, not amazing, but a good deck. And people did not know what we were getting into. I remember watching, I think it was, whose video was it? I think it was Mega Capital G at the time. And he was talking about, and forgive me if I'm wrong about this, but it could have been someone else, how Dragon Rulers were okay, they were balanced, they weren't busted. And this is before we knew about Dragosac, this is before we knew about the babies. So that tells you people's perspective. We thought +1-ings were good cards, but we didn't know how broken Dragon Rulers could be because they were such big bodies and the way you could abuse them. We knew little. At the time, the deck that was being hyped up for Lord of the Tachyon Galaxy wasn't Dragon Rulers, it wasn't Spellbook of Judgment, it was actually Harpies. Prior to this, the past month of February and March, Harpies Pet Dragon had shot up in price because there was only one printing at the time. So Harpies were considered to be the next best meta-defining deck because Hysteric Sign was OP. And even to this day, Hysteric Sign is a dang good card. But we thought that was going to be the meta deck headed into National season, headed into, the summer season. So that turned out to be completely wrong. I know Jeff Jones or Billy Brake did play Harpies and did good. I played the Harpy deck. I still have it. Have my ulti Chandlers first ed. But it was no Dragon Rulers. Though it could go for Dragosac. That was something because you could go into Dragon, bring a Harpies Pet Dragon with Chandler, and then go for level 7 and go into Dragosac. And Dragosac was busted. And you also had level 7 Big Eye. But yeah, different times, as you can see here. I'm reminiscing about when I started this channel. Like I said, I've been playing this game since 2002 to now, competitively. So I can reminisce about older formats, but just with this channel, remembering if you go back to my earlier videos, we're talking about the Dragon Rulers and things of that nature. And at that time, too, they announced in March of that year, I think it was, of 2013, they also announced the Blueeyes structure deck coming out. Who remembers that? Like, at that time, I was playing Blueeyes for fun. I had my fun little wonky deck. It was mainly to go for Blueeyes, Fusion, Ultimate Dragon. And we look back 6 years later, we have, Blueeyes has won a Worlds tournament. It has Alternative Dragon. It has been getting countless more support. It is still a good deck to some degree. You have multiple versions of Blueeyes now. It's just it's evolved so much from what it was then to now. We have gotten so much just love thanks to the movie, thanks to just generic support in general for old archetypes, which prior to 2013, they had some support here and there, but there wasn't a lot of nostalgic support for older archetypes at that time. The formula Konami seemed to be doing was, okay, this is what we're going to do. We just keep printing more and more archetypes. We'll give you 1 or 2 cards here and there. We're not going to completely reboot an archetype, which they started doing in 2014, 2015, thanks to the movie. And we can look back with hindsight and say, thank you, Konami, for doing that, because it's so much fun playing fun old archetypes, even if they're not meta-relevant. And it kind of really started, I feel like, with Harpies. Harpies was really the first reboot they did of an old archetype, because before this, Harpies they were fun, but they weren't anywhere as good. When they got released in Lord of the Tachyon Galaxy, they could be played in the meta. They were good. It was just the fact that there was 2 better archetypes ahead of them because of broken cards, aka Dragon Rulers, aka Spellbook of, the spellbooks with the new support of Judgment. So yeah. Other things I remember from that time was the fact that at that time in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh, it was more grindy. The community was a lot different to some degree. I know the community is still sometimes a little toxic, but personally in the last year and a half, it has felt a lot less toxic than it used to be when I was younger. And I don't know if that's just a change in culture or whatnot, but I remember Yu-Gi-Oh! When I first started was a lot more toxic. Deck building concepts were more based on +1s. You know, the game back then was card destruction was still good. I mean, yes, we had Modulce, the Queen, you know, Tiramisu, which didn't target, and that was broken. That was OP for that time. That card, I will always say to my dying day, that card was ahead of its time. Modulce, Queen, Tiramisu, because that was unconceivable back then. Now it's just good. Like, it's standard. Oh, it's a good card now. But back then, that was 3, 4, 5 years ahead of its time. Tiramisu was, I feel like. But you didn't have the break my board mentality. You did have some OTKs, but mainly, like I said, in this time of Water Firefish format, and even prior to that, you had to grind and work for your pluses a lot more. After Dragon Ruler format, you start to see this slowly start to dissipate. You do see it pick it up in hat format, things of that nature. And the community was more receptive to different concepts and builds. It wasn't, I mean, it's always been this way to some degree, I will admit, where like, this is an archetype, you run this many ratios. And even to this day, we still do that, but back then it felt more of a, and maybe this is just me reminiscing a little bit too much, but it always felt people were more open to different concepts and ideas. Even if they hadn't topped, and say, oh, this is a good concept or idea, I'll take it to an event and try it out. And if they would succeed, they didn't. If they come back to the drawing board. But you didn't have the type of Yu-Gi-Oh! Where it was break my board mentality. You didn't have these unkillable cards, I would call them. We didn't have kaijus in the game. You have to remember this. What was it, like a year later, we had how were we going to kill towers? You know, Apocrypal Towers. How did you kill that? You didn't have Utopia the Lightning. No, you had Diamond Crab King to kill this card. Towers Turbo, that's a year later, but still. OP, broken. You get where I'm going with that. So, was that a year later? I think that was a year later. Yeah, it was about a year later. A little bit more than a year, but yeah. So, the game has changed a lot since I first started doing this YouTube video. It's just fun to go back and reminisce about how this has changed, how all the things I've gone through, and just how the game has evolved from 6 years ago when I started this channel to now. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, guys, on how you feel like the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Has changed in the last 6 years. And until next time, take care, have fun dueling, good luck dueling to all of you, and I'll see all of you guys next time. Take care, everybody.